Former Speaker of the House, and of course a Fox News contributor. Newt Gingrich is with us. You are on my radio show today, and I want you to, at the end of the interview, you said something that was extraordinarily chilling to me, but I actually think it's true. You said that this president it represents the greatest national security threat to ever occupy the White House. And it's not something that I think any American wants to ever say about any president, putting all politics aside. But you believe that. Why?
Well, I think that the danger from Islamic supremacists grows every year. I think sooner or later they're going to learn how to make biological or chemical or nuclear weapons, or how to buy them or steal them. I think we have at risk losing an American city. And I think you have a president who, for psychological reasons, for ideological reasons, for whatever reason, is incapable of dealing with, recognizing, being honest about this threat. And let me say, one simple change, Sean, will begin to move us in the right direction. What happened in California was an act of war. We need to drop this notion that there are these random terrorist acts. This was an act of war. It was an attack on America by people who want to destroy our way of life. And once we get this in our head, these are acts of war going on. These are people, there are 1,000 cases of people preparing to wage war against the United States, and you have an attorney general and a president and a secretary of state who are incapable of understanding the reality of the world we live in.
It really
terrorist nukes are in the U.S. right now. And, of course, as you point out in your book, if al-Qaeda or some jihadist organization had been in control or has been in control, they would have already been detonated. I mean, they would not want to wait for these weapons to degrade. Nuclear weapons do degrade. But if someone above the jihadists were in control, then we can say, hey, maybe that's why these bombs haven't gone off yet. But they are here, aren't they?
Well, yes and no, in a sense of exactly what they have. It's very much like what we were talking about before we came on in the Cuban Missile Crisis. A lot of people look at that, and what they do is they miss the sort of obvious question on the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then we'll get to the bombs here. What they don't say is, well, why would the Soviets want missiles there? I mean, why would they want to take a chance of a confrontation in a Third World War with the United States by putting intercontinental ballistic missiles in Cuba? And people don't ask that question. And the obvious answer is they don't need them. They didn't need them there. They had nuclear-armed submarines sitting 7 miles off the coast of Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Miami, New Orleans, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and in the blink of an eye, those cities would be gone. So what are you taking a big risk on putting an intercontinental ballistic missile in Cuba, 90 miles away from the homeland? What? So you can reach Detroit? I mean, was that so important when you could already obliterate all of the main coastal cities in the country? Well, of course not. So that's the type of question I ask myself, and that there has to be more to it. So in terms of the bombs here, they don't actually need, a 30 trillion kiloton bomb on a missile sent from Iran. They keep looking at the intercontinental ballistic missiles of Iran and say, when will they get it, and all this sort of stuff. In fact, what I've said is more likely is something that we used to call a dirty bomb. In other words, it doesn't have to be a huge bomb that would, wipe out the entire Northeast. You could simply have a dirty bomb with radioactive material already here and almost anywhere. And so the question then is, well, if they've got it here, why are they not using it? And there seems to be only one logical answer, and that is that these jihadists, so-called jihadists, are directed from above. Because it's that feigning incompetence sort of thing. They can't. The movement behind these people can't be as incompetent as they seem to be. For example, early on in the jihadist activities, we kept hitting them, whether it was drones or air attacks or whatever, because we located them because they would use cell phones. Now, any teenager can tell you how a cell phone works. You don't have to get a tap, like a landline. The cell phone goes up to to the satellite in the sky, and then is beamed down to, Austin, Texas, or Brussels, or wherever in Europe. And so, obviously, these things are easily intercepted, and you can target them. So the fact that certain things haven't happened means that these actual jihadists really cannot be in control ultimately of what's going on. And so I cover a lot of this in various books, my 9/11 books, my Secret Nazi Plan book, my Paralete, Their History and Future. And so the same thing would apply to, for example, a dirty bomb in New York. And I've mentioned in the past,
about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.